Well, I want to talk to you about the next sort of 15, 20 minutes, some work we've been doing exploring what happens when an advanced therapy arrives at a hospital, disappears inside. How do you track, trace, know where it is? And to put this into context, Leeds Teaching Hospitals, where I work, is an enormous organisation. We see 1.5 million patients each year. We have 17,000 staff, and we have 7 different hospital sites spread across Leeds. A really complex, challenging organisation that delivers a whole wide range of therapies and is included in NHS England's CAR-T commission sites as well. So we are now starting to deliver advanced therapies from a CAR-T perspective, as well as various gene therapies in our clinical services as well. So we have a complex environment in which we work. And over the next couple of years, it's going to get even more complex as we build 2 brand new hospitals in the centre of Leeds, a brand new children's hospital and a brand new adult facility as well. Within these, there's significant scope for service, innovation, bringing in new technologies, new therapies such as advanced therapies. And part of what we're going to do with the disused estate is actually start to develop an innovation district aligned to the hospitals, where we can do more partnered innovation and development with partners going forwards as well, that feeds into clinical service going forwards. But for us, our perspective of this talk, what we were looking to do and looking to understand is, if advanced therapies are to be scaled, management hospital sites, and particularly really complex sites like Leeds Teaching Hospitals, where you have one pharmacy team working across 7 different hospitals, it has to be scalable. It has to be made simple. You have to design out complexity, because multiple different processes will breed inefficiency and actually will potentially lead to mistakes. And that will compromise patient safety, and that's something none of us want at all. So we have a mantra in the NHS called GIRFT, get it right first time. So within the workshop, we were wanted to understand really how do we take complexity out, because complexity will make life easier for our couriers, for our manufacturers, for our hospital managers, for our clinicians, for our pharmacy team, and actually start looking at how we do this as a seamless supply chain from patient out thousands of miles away back to the patient again, and how do we link that together far better. And also there's going to be a significant amount of collaboration in this. Where are the areas we need to work on together to make things better, and what can we learn from what we're doing already? We do a huge amount of work already in existing practices, so there will be things we can learn and actually bring in to solve some of the challenges we've got with management of advanced therapies at scale. So the work we did focused on a number of different areas. So firstly, we explored product arrival. So looked at where products should arrive, who will receive them, how will someone be alerted to arrival of that? What's the role of the driver in delivery, and where is packaging removed, and who should be doing this? It's a complex situation, and with 7 hospitals. Actually, where do you go at each of those hospitals? You shouldn't be telling a driver to go towards J34, because they'll never find it. So we needed to explore arrival. Once the product had arrived, we then wanted to explore the barriers, the internal moving and handling. What are the physical obstacles? What equipment do we need to use? How do we make sure products get to the right patients? Notification of the care team, so that we've got seamless internal communication as well, and making sure that we've got sight of internal chain of custody and location as well. My finance director does not want to be responsible for losing £500,000 worth of product once it's been dropped at the door. He's made that very clear. And then there's other things, where should we be storing things locally, and are fresh products different in kind of their handling to frozen ones? What are the time constraints on that? Really exploring those areas, and actually, how do we work with that frozen, that cryo chain? And then perhaps most importantly of all, what's the training needs? How should this be provided, and to whom, and who should do this? And Leeds have bespoke in general. Some people might be doing these activities all the time. Some people might be doing just 2 or 3 advanced therapies a year. So we need to look at that reinforcement, that accessibility of training as well. So when we started looking at product arrival, we actually went down to generic delivery bay and just watched the lorries come and go and realized that this generic delivery bay was just not going to be suitable for delivery of products. It was far too noisy. There were, multiple deliveries happening simultaneously. Lorries were continually coming and going, variation of deliveries. You couldn't actually hear anything. We struggled to hear ourselves, even though we were huddled together in a small group. And, just taking it and sticking it in a corner, potentially very easy to get lost. So actually, we started to talk about radiopharmaceuticals when we sat down, and the receipt and handling of radiopharmaceuticals is very much managed centrally by pharmacy. So we felt there was a model there from existing practice we could bring in and use that. And an analogy to that also was around staff training in how to handle and manage the receipt of advanced therapies. There should be specific staff trained in how to do that crossover, that handover with the drivers, and that handover process being very well defined, very auditable. 3 keys, for example, needed to authenticate this happened, so we know that something has arrived at the healthcare provider, is being handed over by the courier, visible to the manufacturer, so they absolutely know that it has arrived, with all the paperwork being checked by pharmacy locally where that's going, and making sure that it is the right product, it is there, and knowing where it is before it is then moved up to the wards to be with the patient. And that communication between the courier and the receiving healthcare provider, we felt was really, really essential in terms of, I'm going to be there in 10 minutes or I'm going to be there in an hour, so that staffing could be made available to do that seamless handover, make sure that was being done properly. Even some of the GPS trackers in the shippers going forward would be helpful for actually tracking to the front door, so we knew when something was coming up the M1 from London or Stevenage, so it arrives at the front door in good time and someone's actually waiting there, and the driver isn't hanging around for 10 minutes waiting for someone who's then letting other needs go. So really thinking through that arrival and logistic process as well around all those sorts of things. That designated drop-off point as well, we thought would be really good in terms of efficiencies with couriers, and also making sure that it was absolutely right for then storage at site as well. If storage was going to be needed from a medium-term perspective because the patient wasn't quite ready, then actually it can be delivered to the right point where storage would be available for those as well. Moving then on to sort of internal logistics and moving and handling. With such a huge organization, the complexity of managing advanced therapies has to be minimized to allow management to be done at scale. There are multiple buildings on each of our hospital sites, and moving between them can be difficult. We have had some challenges with advanced therapy providers around actually moving between buildings, and certainly moving across site from our central pharmacy bio suite, where we've done some of the gene therapy provision before, moving just a mile across town of a prepared product has been frowned on. So having to look at what we've got infrastructure at each of the sites for deliveries is something we've needed to do as well. So one of the things we do need to do is that healthcare providers really do need standardized systems in-house for ATMPs, and healthcare providers can't have a different management process, a different management system in place for every product. It's going to cause huge complexity, inefficiency, potentially confusion, and it puts in that complexity, puts patient safety at risk. And within that, we need to be really clear and transparent about the logistics chain of custody internally. With internal logistics processes, where are we going? Are there set routes we need to go through? We discussed the concept of patients actually being blockers as well. So actually, if you had a spill, an accidental spill, or a drop, or an issue through your moving in a highly patient dense or public dense area, you don't want to have to close that bit of the hospital down. Actually, how do you get around patients and use sort of the back corridors and things like that? So even just down to that level of detail in defining the routes that these products should take from pharmacy out to clinical pathways, out to clinical wards, etc., and knowing that where a product is again through internal audit trails, how would we go about doing that? infection control risks, as I mentioned, and dry runs, consistently just checking with manufacturers, actually, is this the right way of doing things? Is the process working right? Continual validations of processes and building resilience into internal systems as well. We're coming to the end of a major pandemic. It has put huge pressure on hospitals in terms of the service provision and the challenges with service provision, and the resilience needs to be able to cope with that. We're also a major trauma centre, so if there is a major incident and we're suddenly flooded with trauma patients, will be a cascading effect across the organisation, and that may have also impact on therapy delivery as well. So we need that resilience internally from a local storage perspective, particularly for frozen products, etc., as well as being able to ship out for NHS, BT, and other partners as well on those things. And then finally, we started talking about training. Training of staff involved in logistics should be done in a common language across the NHS with industry professionals as well. It's a really key area. It's a really important area, and actually people should be able to talk to each other in a common language. There shouldn't be any language gaps handling these therapies from end to end, from acquisition through to delivery back to patients. So there's some work, I think it has been done through some of the advanced therapy treatment centre work already, is looking at gap analysis and actually what training does need to go in, and where are those gaps in training, with courses, staff doing regular refreshers, training being accredited, and staff having these as personal development and professional development things as well, and as much of the training being as general as possible. Yes, there will be some bespoke elements to individual products, such as thawing for cryo products, but some steps will need, and some training will need to be general within all of this as well. So some of the conclusions we came to from the workshop was that there really needs to be coordination and join up right along the pathway, and we have to breed out, and we have to design out this complexity, and now is a great time to design out this complexity. The trials landscape is getting quite full. There's quite a number of advanced therapy trials coming through, and through those trials we can really start to streamline and develop those processes that we write to a clinical service. One of our early experiences with TVEC, where we've done a lot of the trials, was that some of the process we developed with pharmacy and handling for that from a research perspective weren't really scalable then for clinical service, so we had to reinvent things. We want to use whatever approach we have in-house for managing cellular therapies had to be the one we use for research and clinical practice. So we just use one set of standards and one process going forwards. There absolutely has to be assurance for therapy manufacturers as well, that there are sound practices, there is traceability within healthcare providers, and some things we had talked about was a standards framework for internal logistics as well. So sites were accredited not just on clinical provision and pharmacy provision, but on their ability to handle and track therapies through an organisation, because that is just so important. That defined contact point in pharmacy and that concept of a hub for receiving advanced therapies was also something we think absolutely should be the case, and we should be looking in organisations how we develop that hub concept going forwards. And that logistics planning for the last 100 meters actually should happen at acquisition of starting materials. It should absolutely be essential all the way through, and if we can link a patient to a therapy right at the start of that acquisition and make that seamless, as Stephen was talking about seamless data earlier, that will be really important, as well as consistent interoperable approach to product labeling and consistency and linkage right through that chain as well. So out of some of the work we've been doing, we've been progressing some of those thoughts, and we're really using the outputs of the workshop now to shape the pathways and systems and processes around this currently invisible 100 meters, and using this for ourselves for care and research going forwards. So knowing where a therapy is, knowing where it is in the organisation, knowing it's got to the right patient, and knowing that a trained staff member's dealt with it as well, making sure that that chain of custody and that responsibility, we're getting the right staff in there. We're also looking now at actually how we can link a therapy digitally to an individual patient. Can we actually link that therapy in the PAS, the patient administration system in the hospital somehow, so that acquisition, almost you're linking that end product back, or that pathway back to that individual patient in the hospital systems, so it is seamless and it will come back. And how do we digitally document arrival? How we can use a hub to sort of manage these processes as well. So in-house, we're starting to do some work now with a program called Scan for Safety. This is something that was developed a number of years ago for tracking and managing medical devices. So on this program, every product, patient and location is barcoded. So we know where any medical device is in the hospital at any time. So if there is a recall, within 30 minutes, we can have every single product of that lot off the shelf. Which is fantastic from a patient safety perspective. It also means we know which patient has had which product as well, because we can link in the patient record which lot of medical device has been used with that patient as well. So again, if there is a recall, if there is a metal on metal hip issue, again in the future, we know which patients from our patient record we need to recall for investigation for those sorts of things. And this Scan for Safety program using barcodes is gradually being rolled out across the NHS nationally. So we're now doing some work adapting this for internal management of advanced therapies, linking that therapy digitally to the hospital PAS, and being able to move a therapy around a hospital and locate where that is with barcode and scanning, and just know where that is at any time during the hospital. And we've now got some proof of concept that we can absolutely do that. And we'll be now, next stage with that work is moving a therapy out to a manufacturer via a world courier and back again, and showing we can do this end-to-end seamlessly going forwards. And then looking further, we're going to adapt the approach and actually potentially combine that with RFID tags as well. So actually, building 2 new hospitals. Within those hospitals, we're looking at how we build in RFID tracking anyway for managing assets going forwards. But actually, we could adapt this approach even further in the future by combining it with RFID. The barrier to using RFID at the moment in existing buildings is the cost of retrofitting and putting the infrastructure in. So there are barriers to doing that as we're going forward. And as I said, looking at how we do this approach using a hub as well, and using that central management of things. So some acknowledgements from the work. Simon Elson was someone I worked with for a number of years at the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, sadly no longer with us, but Simon and I conceived this workshop over a couple of beers in a bar, and he is greatly missed by the Cell and Gene Therapy community. But also would like to acknowledge the work of the people who participated in the workshop as well, and these were people from a range of backgrounds, from clinical management, pharmacy, nurses, hospital management, NHSBT, a real wide range of people involved with this. So it was a really interesting piece of work that's starting now to impact what we're doing. We're trying to test local things, but also now bring other sites on board with this as we're starting to prove concepts work as well. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that's been interesting, and happy to take any questions.
No, great, thanks, Chris. That's really sort of aligned with what we've been talking about, is like how does this all come together, right? So really appreciate you walking us through this. We do have some questions for you if you are ready. One of them is, and I don't unfortunately have a name with it, but how much can clinical sites' preferences and capabilities influence the choices of companies developing advanced therapies? Or are they involved too late to have a say in the process development?
That's a really interesting question. So where hospitals have manufacturing suites on site, so for example, Manchester, Newcastle, etc., I think there is that ability to have that crosstalk in terms of academic projects and the ability there. We do not have a manufacturing suite. We will never have a manufacturing suite. We will always be receiving final products to base. And at the moment, I think the manufacturer, because it has to be developed at the preclinical stage, is disconnected from the clinical system. So actually there are opportunities for clinical teams for hospitals to get involved in that earlier, and that's something we would really welcome. Certainly our pharmacy team would welcome you getting involved in that development of the manufacture. How do we shape that manufacture right so that it is working at the front door? And I don't think it's the clinical end users. I think it's the pharmacy who have more of the input into that. So I think in answer to the question, it's it's disconnected at the moment, but I think there is the chance, it would be great to have the chance to feed into that more.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it comes back again to that fact that we need to, as an industry, sort of standardized approach to this, because they can't have multiple companies coming to them, manufacturers, and saying, we have to do it this way, our system only allows this, it doesn't coordinate with the hospitals. So they're going to have a lot more variability in the type of suppliers or manufacturers that are coming in and looking to treat patients, their facilities. So again, back to that open dialogue and conversation within the industry to set standards. Okay, so another question that we have here is, this comes from Robert Sasa, and he would like to know, do you think there will be collaboration with the apheresis center and the pharmacy? Apheresis is familiar with the cold chain.
Yes, absolutely. It's already happening at site. So with the work we've been doing on the barcoding work, we've been linking in with apheresis to do that in terms of the sample acquisition side of it. So there is crosstalk happening between apheresis and pharmacy already with this.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then in just a general question, have you seen pushback, and this from Angela Murley, there could be reluctance for medical staff regarding the training sessions?
No, actually, because staff are really interested. This is such a new area, it's such an innovative area, and the culture we've got in the organisation is one of people continually wanting to push the boundaries of care. So actually, we've had a really good uptake whenever we've been running ATIMP training sessions, be that in pharmacy or clinically. We've really had people wanting to engage and get involved because they just get this as a really innovative, cutting-edge area and want to be involved with it.
That's fantastic, and it's so exciting. So with that, I just would like one more question to ask you, and this was one of the poll questions. Just a fun, so at the end here is, which element would you rate as most critical to implement for cell therapy delivery at multiple sites? That's that one thing that you think just has to get right.
Tracking. Know where it is.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Without a question.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Really appreciate your flexibility with our technical difficulties. Thank you for answering these questions, and really appreciate it.